Hello, Brother Sewing and Crafting family. Brother Brand Ambassador Angela Wolf here, and we are continuing our Quilt to Fashion Challenge. And wait till you see what we have today. Tina has taken that little square and she has transformed it into one of the most beautiful quilts you've ever seen. So if you've never been here before, say hi. We are streaming on Brother YouTube and Facebook pages. I'll see your comments, but I'm going to be in the comments today because technically we're not live. We're live in the comments. All right, so say hi and grab your notebook. You're not going to want to miss this one. See you in a second. All right, Tina. Oh my gosh, I'm just dying over this quilt that you made.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. It was really a fun project.
Okay, so if you are new or you haven't been watching Brother for the last few weeks, you're going to have to go back and watch from the beginning. So Cindy Hogan designed a quilt block using Brother's software. It was given to quite a few of us to do a challenge. What can you do with this? Wow, how do you make it different? And as you've seen, there's been some crazy things coming out of there, from garments to tennis rackets to a beautiful quilt. So Tina, you have to tell, and everyone take a look at that quilt behind her head.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that doesn't even look anything like the original.
Well, I simplified it a little bit and I'll walk you through because I was having a hard time picking out that many fabrics. So I just decided I would go with two. And my color inspiration was actually turquoise jewelry.
Which matches your necklace.
I know. How about that?
I love those colors. I mean, that doesn't even look anything like the original.
Well, what I love about quilting generally is, you look at a single block and you get one idea of what it looks like. But when you combine several blocks together, it changes the appearance completely. It's magical.
Absolutely. Well, because we're in the comments today, I just would love to hear everyone that's been watching look at the difference of this quilt to all the others. This quilt challenge is so much fun. I think we're going to have to do this the whole rest of the year, but this is absolutely gorgeous. So why don't we get started? And so why don't you show them how you change this up? And you have a picture of the original as well.
I do. So let's go ahead and start with the original block. And as you can see here, we had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look, I can still count. That's great. 5 different colors in here. And I was struggling to figure out what fabrics to use. And I decided that I wonder what it would look like in 2 colors. So let's take a look at the block just in 2 colors. And see, it really looks very different, but it's the same exact block, right? But it gives it a completely different appearance.
Unbelievable. It absolutely doesn't even look the same.
Yeah, and that's the magic of quilting. So one of the great things about the advanced quilt software is once you pick your block, it basically generates all the cut files for you. So I basically ran over to my ScanNcut and cut some of these out. So let's pop to the ScanNcut and I'll show you how that part works here, okay? So I sent them to my ScanNcut. And so I've got them here on the machine. And basically, I made 8-inch blocks. So if I come in and take this file here, it's all the pieces that are required to make a complete block. At the top part of my screen are my aqua components, and the bottom half are the black components. So basically here, I would just say, okay, I don't have anything else to add because I've pretty much filled up my mat at this point. And then when I did mine, I had the 2 different colors of fabric on the mat at the same time. So I scanned and took a picture of my fabric and made sure that all my pieces were on the appropriate color. Once that was done, I went to OK. And of course, here I want it to cut. So when I pick the action, it's cut. Now, a couple of things on the cut settings. You want to make sure, I was doing heat transfer vinyl before I cut this block out. So I wanted to make sure that my half cut was turned off because I want to cut all the way through my fabric pieces. And these are really simple shapes, so cutting at a speed of 3 was fine, and I went ahead and left mine on the auto pressure, and then I moved into the cutting sequence. And I already cut them out, so let's look at the pieces that we have, and you can see how easy this is. So because I'm making a quilt, I didn't want any kind of iron-on fusible on the back of my pieces, and so I starched them all, and you can use whatever your favorite spray starch is, but I'm pretty liberal when I starch my pieces. I I spray them pretty good, and then I sort of squish the fabric up in my hand, and then I iron it dry. And then once it's dry, I put it on the mat. And so I needed
So
a 5x12.
I just have a question because I know that comes up all the time. You're using the fabric mat, so there's
Yep.
no backing on the fabric. That fabric, by the way, in your film looks like faux suede or something. It looks gorgeous. But
Yeah.
when you say you're generous on the starch, you just soak it?
Not completely soaked, but I mean, I spray it and you can see some areas puddle and other parts are dry. And then I scrunch it up in my hand like this, and that kind of distributes the starch throughout the whole piece. And then I iron it dry. It does get your hands sticky, so you're going to wash your hands when you're done with that step. And what you'll find is the starch basically takes all the stretch out of the fabric. You know, fabric, even quilting cottons will stretch across the bias, but the starch keeps that from happening. And that's what generates this perfect cut. So as you can see, I've got it on the fabric mat. I use the fabric blade. It's the one with the same gold top on it. And the block cuts out in under 5 minutes. So it's really quick to cut out all the pieces. A couple other things. I love my brayer tool. So when I'm putting my fabric on the mat, I use my brayer tool, even for heat transfer vinyl paper, no matter what I'm doing, because it makes sure that I don't have any air bubbles underneath what I'm trying to cut on the mat. And so it really gives me much stronger adherence to the mat. And then when it's time to lift the fabric, this fabric mat is very, very tacky. So I use the little spatula tool and just slide up under there, and then I can peel my pieces off. Now, if you've ever been, isn't that fun?
Yeah. And you know what, Tina, I have to tell you, I've not seen anyone yet up to this date use these great tools that we use for vinyl and everything else on the ScanNcut. Not for fabric, though. Usually we're just using our hands to pick stuff off for fabric. I never even thought about this for the fabric. It makes it so much easier, and then you're not stretching the fabric.
It's so quick. And if you ever, there are some fabrics, and maybe you don't starch it quite as much as I did. Sometimes as you're pulling up the pieces, if you ever have the fabric start to curl on you, what you can do is turn the mat upside down, and instead of peeling the fabric from the mat, peel the mat from the fabric, and that'll keep your fabric from curling as you pull it off the mat.
Another great tip. Another great tip. And yes, you can still get those tools. I put a little link. Just call your brother dealer. They have them.
Yeah, they're amazing tools. Now, I know that some people, especially if you were doing a larger quilting project, you might actually want to, use your rotary cutter to cut out the pieces. But let me show you how the ScanNcut can help in that process too. So I'm going to pop back over to my ScanNcut, and I'm going to pull up another file. And this is basically what I would call pattern pieces for the quilt block. And that's going to be this guy right here. Because the quilt block, it's basically 4 half square triangles, 4 rectangles, and a square, right? And all I'm going to do is I'm cutting these out as pattern pieces. And again, to finish the process over here at the ScanNcut, I would basically put, and I have cardstock on my mat, and I would move in here. I would select an action for cut, and then I would cut out my pieces, which again, I've already done. So let's pop back over here and we'll look at the mat I've chosen this time. So I told you I was using cardstock, so that means I'm going to use my low tack mat, the aqua one here. And you could use your rotary blade for cutting this out. You can use the rotary blade for cutting out the fabric. You could use your standard auto blade. Either one of those will work nicely. And so basically I've taken out my pattern pieces, as you can see here. And let me tell you how I would use this. Let's say I was doing a really, a large number of blocks, 15 or 20 blocks, and I really thought it would be maybe quicker to use my rotary cutter. With my pattern pieces cut out, and remember on the ScanNcut and in that quilting software, we've already added in our seam allowance. So these are the finished cut sizes. You lay them on top of your fabric here, and then you could just run your rotary cutter over it. Now, one tip for you here, any of you who have tried to cut through several layers of fabric at the same time, sometimes you have a little bit of shifting with the rotary cutter. So what I do is I take some temporary spray adhesive, and I put that on the back of my pattern pieces. And that keeps them from moving. And then I'm able to cut through up to 6 layers of fabric at the same time. So that's another technique that your ScanNcut really can make that much quicker and easier for you.
So just to be clear, because I know some people are going to say, wait, how? So when you do your pattern like that, are you actually cutting using your rotary blade, not with your ScanNcut, just using a rotary blade with, or using the rotary blade with the ScanNcut?
Okay, so if I were going to use the rotary blade, I would have it on that fabric mat like I showed you previously. But
Right.
sometimes, you know, if you, let's say you had 25 or 30 blocks to cut, you might think that it might be a little faster sometimes to use your rotary cutter. And so in that case, I'm using the ScanNcut to cut out my paper pattern pieces that already have my seam allowance on them. I put spray adhesive on the back here. And then basically what I would do is I would take my rotary cutter here and a ruler and just really quickly cut around the edges. And I would only do this if I were, you know, making a large number of pieces and just needed to speed that up a little bit.
Right. And thank you for repeating that. Only because I know a lot of people are new to the ScanNcut and they're probably thinking, oh my gosh, you have like 6 layers of fabric you're cutting. Now the ScanNcut can do a lot, but just so you are clear, so thank you for repeating that in case someone just was not paying total attention. Now they got it.
Okay. All right. So once you have the pieces cut out, then it's time for some construction. So a couple of things. I actually did all of my sewing and embroidery work on the Luminaire, but let me show you the accessories that I would have for the Luminaire really quickly. So I'm just going to go back to my camera here. So basically, I put in the straight stitch plate on my machine that has the single hole here, not the large opening here. And that's important because if you've ever been chain piecing quilt pieces and the little corners get sucked down underneath this plate, if you'll switch to the straight stitch plate, you'll have a much better experience. It keeps the block from being pulled in underneath this plate. And then I paired that with a 1/4 inch foot. And so as you can see here, I have a little flange and I just ran the raw edge of the fabric against the flange. And on the Luminaire, I chose stitch 1-03, which is basically a center needle position straight stitch, and then just chain pieced all the pieces together. So, and all these accessories are in the accessory kit that comes with the Luminaire. And of course, we've got similar accessories for the rest of the Brother sewing machines as well. All right.
Absolutely. And then you mentioned the stitch. Did you just leave the same stitch length that's universal on there? Did you change it? I think it's like a 2.5 when you.
Yeah, I just left it at 2.5 and had really good results.
Okay.
So I think that would work. And then basically then you have this pile of pieces, right? And it's time to build your block. So the first thing I did is I started with the half square triangles. And so basically it's just a black and an aqua triangle, right sides together, and then sew them straight down. And I chain piece them all together. So just, you know, you're sewing with a little, you know, a few stitches in the air here and then the next piece and keep going. Now, one thing I did here that might seem a little unusual to people, because I know I've certainly taken quilt classes where they tell you to press the seams to one side or the other. I actually pressed mine open, completely open, because I found that my block was much flatter and had less bulk as I constructed it. So let's keep going through the process. So once I had the half square triangles built, basically the block then has 3 different subcomponents, if you would, here. Okay, so this is a half square triangle, one of the rectangles, and a second half square triangle. These are 2 of the rectangles and the little square for the middle. And then this is a mirror image of what we have over here. Okay. And again, as you can see, I've got all of these seams pressed completely open at this stage. Okay. Now, when you go to join them together, the only thing that's a little bit fussy is as you join these 2 together, you're going to take a couple extra seconds and you want to make sure that where those color changes are between the pieces match up completely. So I actually put the little clips here as I was sewing and then just sewed straight here. And then you would open this up and then basically do the same thing on the other side here. Okay. So once you have oops, upside down. Once you have all that construction done, then we have a finished block. Now, pressing at this stage was a little bit different, okay? So up to this point, I've pressed all of my seams open, so I have a flatter block to work with. When I did the center construction, I actually did press both of these seams completely to one side, okay? And so, because when trying to press this open, it just became a little bit unwieldy. But even with these pressed to one side, the blocks are really nice and flat and easy to work with.
So did you have, just out of curiosity, did you press them in or out?
I
pressed to follow exactly what you've done.
Yep, I pressed these 2 center ones are both pressed out. You can see on the back. This one's pressed this way and this one's pressed that way.
Perfect. Those colors, I'm just staring at those colors. They're gorgeous.
I know they are. It really is a kind of a classic color combination. Now, the other thing just to talk about really quickly is with that advanced quilt software, I could have chosen to make my blocks any size I wanted to, right? And so just for fun, I went ahead and made the same block as a 4x4. And here's another one at a 6x6. But I could have made my blocks any size I wanted to. I would pick my final block size and it would generate the appropriate size pieces. And then I'd cut out and I'm off to the races.
Wow.
So
Beautiful.
like this one, I'm actually thinking, I really like the 4x4. I can envision this being a border on a quilt in the future. Because it's just
I
a
can
really
see that being a border or a really cool connecting all those as a cool thing going on the outside of my jeans.
Oh, that's a good idea. I love that idea. Yeah, that's great. All right, so once we have our blocks together, then I was trying to figure out how many blocks I would use. So basically, I made a picture of it. So let's look at I pulled 9 blocks together. And again, here you can see that the individual blocks kind of look like a pinwheel, but when you join them all together, you have those nice kind of diamond elements that show up in the center. So I really liked the way that was coming together. Then it was time to think about adding some borders. So I went ahead and added some borders. So let's look at that picture. So again, I have a 2.5-inch strip for the aqua border and a 4-inch strip for the black border around the outside. And I just basically did this with pictures. So I had a really good idea what it looked like before I started the final stitching. And I personally was really happy with it at this point. And so I basically sewed all these parts together. And now it's time to go to the embroidery machine and add some beautiful quilting designs.
Oh, even more. I love that look though. It's so rich. So don't forget to leave comments here about what your favorite part of this quilt is, because now that you've been following along, this gets even better.
Yep. So let me show you what I have over here. So I made a little cheater version of this. These are little 5-inch blocks. And here I'm using the magnetic 5x7 frame that works on the Luminaire, just so you know what's in the hoop here. And you know, the block has all the straight lines in it. And so when I was looking through my stash of quilting designs, I really wanted something with some circular elements in it. And so I finally found one that I liked. So we'll pull this guy up here. All right, and set him. Now, it's time to place it on my block, right? But the machine makes it so easy. I'm going to go to the fabric scan button right here at the top. And I'm going to tell it to take a picture basically of what's in my hoop. And it's just going to take a few seconds here. And I love this feature. Whenever I'm using a quilting design and trying to place it on a project, I always start at this point. So here you can see a picture of my block. Might be a little hard to see the stitches here. I'm going to go ahead and change that thread color really quick to a lighter color. All right. And then let's go ahead and blow this up a little bit so we can see it. Okay, so now I haven't stitched it yet, but you can see my quilting design superimposed onto the fabric that's in my hoop. And so in order to place it, I pop into edit and I've got lots of options here. If I needed to resize it, I have a size button. If it was rotated, I have a rotate button. If I need to move it around, I can do that. And honestly, when I'm moving it, I normally go to the rotate button because on that screen, I can move it and I can rotate it on the same screen. So here, I'm just looking to see if my design is equally placed between both edges of my block. And it looks like it could come up just a wee little bit here. I'm looking on the sides. That all looks good. I don't think I have any rotation. So at that point, I can see what the finished product is. I would go to OK, pop into embroidery, and now I'm ready to stitch out the block. It's just that simple.
So Tina, I know in the comments, people are like, wait a minute, where did that design come from? That's built into the machine?
It is not. This is not.
Okay, so it's not.
This is from, I have a giant folder of quilting designs, and so I pulled this one out of that folder.
Okay, just so good. I'm glad I asked that because I know somebody's going to be scrolling through there looking for that. But they could do something similar in my design center if they wanted to.
They absolutely could. And there are some really cute quilting designs on the machine. So there's some great options on the machine as well. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. So let's take a close-up look at the 9 blocks that have the embroidery pattern on them really quickly. So see how pretty that is?
Oh my gosh, that totally changes the look.
I know, it's great, right? It looks completely different, like a whole different thing. And again, all those round elements are matching up with all the straight lines, and it creates a really cool look. And just so you know, I used a 30 weight thread for all of the quilting stitches that has silver metallic elements in it. So the thread has more visual weight, and it's got that little metallic sheen in it as well, which is really nice.
Wow. I'm blown away. That looks like a piece of artwork on the wall, which it is. It's on your wall. But I mean, that totally changes. I liked it the other way, but now it's like a complete wow factor.
Isn't it cool? I mean, that's the thing that's so cool about quilting. You know, you look at it one way and then you add something to it and you get a completely different look. And it's, you know, you have so many options in it. It really makes me wish I would have paid attention in geometry class more when I was in school.
Well, there's always time, right?
That's true.
Well, now they have fabulous software. You're good.
Well, at this point, then I decided I needed to do something to the borders. So we're going to pop back over to the ScanNcut and let me show you how I embellished our borders. So I used designs that are actually on the machine. And so I come into the patterns, you know, we've got border patterns that are on here. And it's really funny. I have never used any of these with fabric before, and there's all kinds of pretty ones in here. But I was looking for something with again, that round element. And this first one here really caught my eye. I loved it, right? So I picked this guy. He's the perfect size for my quilt. I don't have to change his size. And I actually made 9 of these. So I would have increased this, you know, till I had a total of 9. I'm just going to put a couple on here for right now. And we'll set those. And you can see they show up on my mat. They're a little close together here. So I'm just going to pop this one down just a smidge. And then I wanted those little swirly guys for the 4 corners, kind of like a cornerstone element, if you would. So again, I wasn't sure where to find it on the machine, but I'm going to tell you because I found it. So we're going to go to add. We're going to go back to the patterns. All right. And we're going to come in here. And the one here with all the food elements, check out the lollipop. There's my little swirly guy right in the middle. All right. So I went ahead and left him in his default size. And you can see because there's lots of pieces here, I have the choice of any of the individual pieces or the whole thing. All I wanted was the little swirly guy. So I pulled him up. His size was perfect for my project. I went ahead and added 4 of those because I've got 4 corners. See, I did pay attention a little bit in geometry class. All right. And so then everything's going to fit in my mat. Now, in this case, what I'm doing is I'm going to iron fuse it onto the fabric. So I've got the Brother iron-on fusible on the back of the fabric. Again, I filled the mat with fabric. So at this point, I would just come in here and I would pick as the action cut. Again, from settings, pretty much what we've been doing all day today. We're going to make sure, of course, that our half cut is off because we want to cut all the way through our fabric. Our designs are a little bit more complicated, so I actually slowed it down to a 2, and I went ahead and left it on auto pressure and then let the machine cut. And let's see what we have over here. So first of all, here's a piece of the fabric that's got the fusible ironed on the back. And if you haven't used the Brother fusible product, it's really an awesome product. It has a really good stick to it once it's been ironed down. It fuses to the fabric well at this stage. And when you go to place it on the mat, you're going to basically put the adhesive side of the fabric against the adhesive side of the mat. I remove the paper backing before I put it on the mat, especially when I have anything that's kind of complicated in shape. I get a much better tack with the adhesive to adhesive on the mat. All right.
So just a quick question, Tina.
Yeah.
If you come back to this for a sec, that what you're showing right there with the fabric, and that I watch a lot of comments and people get a little confused about that. So that's a backing. Could you just explain that? Because I know some people, they get so confused. Should they take the paper off? It's going to stick too much to the mat. Did you put the fabric side down or the sticky side down? Could you just explain that just a little bit again, for somebody who's totally new at this?
Oh, well, you know, a few years ago, that would have been me too, because when you go online, you see recommendations for doing it like 47 different ways, right? So what I can tell you is I've tried all the different ways. I have tried to put it with a paper backing against the mat. And if it's a simple shape, you can get away with that. But when you get into things that are complicated, this is a little bit complicated, but things that are a little bit more detailed than this, what I found is the paper actually separates from the fabric, and then it starts to slide, and then you don't have a good cut. I've seen where they recommend that you put the fabric side against the mat and cut it this way. Same kind of thing. In that case, you know, I would definitely have it on my fabric mat and not on my standard mat, but you still risk some slippage in this because I haven't starched it and I've got the fusible on the backside. You have decent results, but what I found works the best on consistently is, again, you've got the fusible on here. I remove the paper backing and then I place the fabric on the mat just like this. So the fusible adhesive to the attack on the standard mat for this is a perfect solution, whether it's a simple or a complicated cut file.
Perfect. And I love that you said you've tested all of them. And and that's why everybody loves watching the Brother Educators, because you guys test it till you find your favorite way. And it saves us a bunch of time.
I know. I needed to watch one of these videos before I started with all of my other alternatives, right? So in this case, because I had the iron-on fusible on the back, I was able to use my standard mat. And in terms of blades, I could have used, I could actually use the fabric mat, the auto blade, or the rotary blade would have all worked well in this. I believe that when I cut this out, I actually had the auto blade in here. Again, I tried everything with all the different tools to make sure that they would all work. And again, when it's time to take the pieces off, this is a great time for that spatula again. And then they lift right off of the mat. And then you're ready to place them where you like them on your quilting project and then fuse them down.
Very easy.
Yeah, it really is easy. And I mean, that would be impossible for me to cut by hand, right? If I didn't have the ScanNcut, there's no way I could have ever put that together.
And I'm still kind of amazed about the sucker with the swirly. I'm like, I would have never even thought about that. And now every time I look at one of the designs in there, I'm going to be like, what could I separate that into? Brilliant. Brilliant.
Well, I mean, don't be real impressed because I looked for the swirly for 20 minutes before I realized it was in the lollipop.
That's awesome.
All right. So next we're gonna I went ahead and put some border designs on the quilt. You can see here that there's quilting on top of the border strips, the inside one and the outside one. And just really quickly, I want to show you how we get that done. First of all, just really quickly, this is a great time for the borders, and I'm going to wait for a little camera change here. This is a great time when doing borders, large quilting projects, to use the quilt sashing frame that we have for the Luminaire. It's got a great 7 by 14 inch embroidery field. It's very easy to reposition things here. Oops. Of course, I'm going in the wrong direction with my hand, but it's really easy to lift the magnets up and reposition the quilt and move into the next section. So it's a great tool to have. And so let's just pop over here to our Luminaire really quickly. And I'm going to get it ready and we're going to walk through this process really quickly. Just going to get rid of my background image here. All right. And then change the hoops. And so basically, when you're doing border strips, and my gosh, this has to be one of my very favorite features on this machine. I used to struggle. I used to not like doing quilting projects because I was really terrible at the borders, all right? But this machine makes it super easy to do that. So I'm going to pop into the embroidery area, and all of our sashing and border patterns are in category Q. And so let's look at what we have here first. So in the first subcategory, I've got 20 different one-color designs and really beautiful options in here. I use this one, number 17, for the black borders, and I actually use number 1 for the aqua borders. Love those both, but lots of really gorgeous options in here. The second subcategory has 5 two-color designs, so if I wanted to mix up my colors in the borders, this would have been a great option for me. And then subcategory 3 would be our hexagonal designs. And again, really beautiful options in all of those. Like I said, I use the one color, so I'm going to go back into subcategory 1. And so, for example, if I'm doing this one, I choose the border that I want here and choose set. And then basically it's telling me what kind of split. Well, my quilt is bigger than my frame, so I'm going to choose this one here. And then really quickly, I'm going to put in the measurements for my quilt. And first is the width, and I have the option. It can be as small as 4.72 inches and as large as 118 inches. So it can do up to a king size quilt, which is awesome. And I think for this one, I'm just going to put in some measurements here. So let's say we have it 30 inches wide and maybe it's 26.5 inches long. Okay. And maybe our border strips are a little more than 3 inches. Now, while you're on the screen, the one thing that's really important for you to pay attention to is the hoop size that's shown right here, because it's going to do a lot of complicated math for you in a second, and it's going to do that math based on the hoop size that you're planning to use. Okay, so I would come in here and I would move this to my 7x14 quilt sashing frame here so that all my math will be great for me when I get to that next one. I'm going to set that border because I forgot to push that button. And then all I do here is go to next. And this next screen is telling me, again, I can recheck my dimensions here. It's letting me know that there's 16 pieces that are going to be required for my border. It doesn't mean 16 hoopings necessarily, but 16 individual pieces. And while I'm here, I've got a couple of options. The default is a single stitch. If I wanted a bolder stitch with a triple stitch, I could press here. And if I wanted to change my thread color, I could make that change here. I'm good with both of those options, so I'll go ahead and save this into memory. And it's letting me know that's what's happened here. All right, and so here it is in memory. That's the last one that I did. So when we pull it up, notice what we have on this screen. We've got all the individual pieces in here, and then I've got another option, which is the whole pattern together. Well, I don't know about you, but I'd rather the machine do all the hard thinking for me. So I'm going to choose the one with all the pieces put together. But you may have an instance where you need to do something with an individual piece. And so it's nice to know that they give you that option here as well. And at that point, once I choose the design and set it, it's going to walk me through, and we're not going to stitch this out this afternoon, but it's going to walk me through a completely automated process where, look, it's telling me how to hoop it. I'm going to start in the upper right corner. It tells me how the quilt should look in my hoop. I would select OK. And then it's basically going to tell me to use the move pattern keys until I have lined up this corner with the corner of my sashing. And it shines the little crosshair directly on the stitching field in the Luminaire. And literally all I do is walk through the instructions, and it tells me when to rehoop. It tells me when it's time to turn a corner. I mean, it makes it so quick and so easy. I love doing borders. I think I did both borders in less than 40 minutes. I mean, that's how quick it is.
Wow, that's really fast.
Yeah, it really is. So let's take a close-up look. I took a close-up picture on the quilt for the borders so that you could see how those are. And you can see that stitching is right, it goes right on top of the fused pieces that we have. You've got the tone on the aqua section. And then I picked up that same aqua color in the outer border. And again, I'm choosing those round elements for both of those that I really think work nicely on this quilt.
Oh my word. It's absolutely gorgeous. And you know what you just showed a second ago with the quilt sashing, I've watched so many comments and questions come through for the last year, especially the last year, because it's a fairly new feature, or it's expanded feature, I should say, on the Luminaire. It looks, a lot of people say, oh my gosh, it looks so complicated. I don't know if I can do the math to get it to the ends. And as you just showed, it's punching in those measurements. The machine does everything. It even shows you how your fabric should look in the hoop. Like, I even did it and didn't screw it up. And I'm not a quilter. And I love how you showed that, because it's really simple. It absolutely looks beautiful on there. Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. So let's look at the whole thing again, because I've got we can see all the pieces now coming back together.
So that embroidery that you put along after you pressed down the edges that you showed that you cut on the ScanNcut, then you added embroidery on top of that. So that would actually hold those pieces in place, even if through washings and stuff then. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that the Brother Iron-On Fusible is a great product. It's the best one that I've tried in terms of things staying, adhered through washing. But yeah, it's always a good idea if something's going to get handled a lot to put a little stitching on top of the fusible, and that quilted sashing border takes care of all that for you.
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely, absolutely gorgeous.
So you want to take a peek on the back, because in some ways it's easier to see the border designs if we just turn the quilt back on its back. And so here you can see the center embroidery, and you can see the two border designs around the edges. Isn't that fun?
Oh my gosh, I'm bringing that up bigger. I actually like that side. I could put that on either side. I mean, that actually looks like a full finished project for me that I think would be gorgeous. I mean, unbelievable. And everybody, it's almost like somebody wants to see the seams inside of your clothes. That's same with quilts. Can we see the back of your quilt?
I know. So because I always get asked that question, I made sure I trimmed all my jump stitches on the back.
It looks awesome. Absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I cannot believe you took that one simple. I mean, this has been one of the most fun projects. And I know Cindy's probably in here watching and in the comments as well. How do you go from one quilt block to that? I mean, absolutely gorgeous. It doesn't even look the same.
Yeah, it's, we have these great tools. Everything's so easy. It's really hard to know when you're done and when to stop, right? You're tempted to do more and more and more.
Exactly. So just, I know a couple questions might come up as far as how you put the quilt together. So you had your top layer, your bottom layer. Did you use one or two things of batting, or what did you use in between your two layers of fabric?
I just used a low loft cotton batting in between, a whole piece of cloth on the back, and then just once the quilt blocks and the borders were assembled on the front, sandwiched all that together, did all the embroidery, trimmed the edges so they were even, and then put the binding on.
Okay. And then when you were embroidering, I know this will come up as well. Did you embroider with the batting in it, or just the fabric, or how did you have all three layers together? Obviously you had all three layers because you can see it from the back, but if you could just explain what you had in there so if they're following.
Yeah. So I had the quilt sandwich. So I had the backing fabric, the batting, and then the finished quilt on the top. I used a little spray adhesive. I really didn't need to on a project of this size, but it keeps anything from shifting as you're moving between the hoopings. And then for the blocks, I basically put that curly Q design on each block. So I went through all 9 of the blocks. Then I fused the pieces onto the border strips, and then I did the 2 border sections, and trim my jump stitches on the backside, put binding on, and done.
And that's it. Absolutely gorgeous. Tina, you knocked this one out of the park.
Thank you. It really was fun. It was, again, the thing that's so awesome about quilting is if you've seen one, you've seen one. There's so many things you can do with all the blocks. I can't wait to see everybody else's projects too.
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. So if you are first a newbie to Brother Sews, or maybe you've been watching forever and you missed the last few episodes, you'll have to go back a couple episodes. You'll see the beginning of this challenge where Cindy shows you how to use the software, how to design this, and she gives the block. So there's also a full blog post on Brother Sews. So I put the link down below, brothersews.com. And I have both hashtags up above. So if you're participating in our quilt challenge, or maybe you're just making one block, it makes a great cup holder, by the way, a great mug rug. And you showed that great when you showed those different sizes. So if you're doing this, be sure to use hashtag Brother Sews, hashtag Brother ScanNcut. They'd love to see what you're working on. And quite often they might share it. Well, Tina, what if you were going to tell somebody who's brand new to quilting, do you have one tip? I know there's 100, but do you have one tip? Just because sometimes it can be a little intimidating. You see all those blocks, and you made it look so easy. You sew it, and you said you just chained it forever instead of just stop and go. But do you have any a tip for someone that's like, I don't know, this might be too more advanced for me, which it's really not.
That old adage, you have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. That's really true for quilting. So when you look at the whole block, it looks really hard, but then in your mind, you just start breaking it into the basic building blocks of the block. And you saw how easy this block was, right? Four little half square triangles where you sew 2 triangles together. Then you put a rectangle in between those. Then you have a square in the middle of 2 rectangles. Those building block pieces are really simple. And then you basically join those 3 parts together into a finished block. So it's easy sometimes to get overwhelmed in the beginning, but every quilt block I've done, because I don't do really hard quilt blocks, but they break down into really easy building blocks, and it's just get started. The hardest thing I think for people is to do the first one. You'll do the first one and you'll be surprised at how well you did and how easy it was. And then everything after that's just a little bit easier.
Just easy. Well, awesome. Well, you sure made it look easy. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, and you can actually go back and watch all of the episodes. I think we're on, 200 something. So you can binge watch for a long time. And if you're on Facebook, be sure to follow us, and you'll never miss a live show. Tina, this was awesome. I can hardly wait until next week to see what's coming up.
Me either. Thanks so much, Angela.
Thanks for joining. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.